Hey, welcome back to How Not to Retire, a psychological approach to a healthy and wealthy retirement. This is episode 45, the difference between financial planning and lifestyle planning. Greetings, I'm your host, Dr. Richard Himmer. Today we're going to talk about something that's usually misunderstood, even by well-meaning professionals in the retirement industry. And that is the difference between financial planning and lifestyle planning, and why focusing on the former while neglecting the latter can lead to unnecessary suffering in your encore years. Let me begin with a question I've posed to hundreds of people over the years. What does retirement mean to you? Give it a thought. What does retirement mean to you? Most people answer with phrases like freedom, relaxation, or time to do what I want. Others mention financial goals. I want to make sure I don't outlive my money. Or I need $1 million to feel secure. Rarely do I hear someone say, I want to maintain my identity. Or I want to grow emotionally even after I leave my career. And therein lies the problem. We live in a culture where retirement has been marketed almost exclusively as a financial event. The moment you stop earning a paycheck, the focus shifts to whether your money will last. And while that concern's legitimate, it's only a fraction of the picture. So let me ask you again, what does retirement mean to you? I mean, really consider that. What does retirement mean to you? Again, most people say freedom. Finally having time to relax. Others might say it means I don't have to work anymore. I don't have to work for the man. And yes, those responses are honest. They reflect what we've been taught to believe, that retirement is the ultimate reward for decades of work. It's when life, quote unquote, gets easier, slower, and perhaps better. Ponder the following thought that came to me when I was reading the story of the two old women from podcast 36. If you remember, Saw was about 75 and Chidzikyak was about 83. And they were from the Athabascan tribe in Alaska during the pre-contact era. What if, and this is what I picked up listening to their story, what if we were never meant to retire, at least in the traditional way? What if retirement does us more harm than good? It's a bold question, but it's one worth asking. You see, the conventional model of retirement is the one we've been sold for decades, but in reality, it's relatively new. The idea that we should stop working entirely at a set age, withdraw from meaningful contribution, and live out our days in leisure, this is a model born of industrial systems and economic policy. It is not human design. In other words, it's a first world challenge, not a blessing. For most of human history, people did not retire. They shifted. They moved from labor-intensive roles to elder roles. They became mentors, storytellers, guides, and caretakers of culture. Their value didn't disappear when they stopped farming or crafting or trading. It evolved. But today, retirement has become synonymous with withdrawal. We speak of stepping away, winding down, or finally doing nothing. And for many, that seems like freedom, at least at first, until the novelty wears off and they find themselves restless, disconnected, depressed, and anxious. Because here's the reality, or here's the truth. We're not wired for that. We're not wired for idleness. We are wired to connect. We are wired for purpose, and we are wired for growth. We were never meant to stop contributing. We were meant to contribute differently. So what if retirement isn't the end of productivity, but the beginning of a different kind of influence? One not driven by deadlines or paychecks, but by wisdom, creativity, and service. What if your encore years are not a time to fade out, but instead to rise into a role that only life experience can qualify you for. Maybe it's time to stop asking when you'll retire and start asking what you're retiring to. What are you becoming? Because perhaps we are never meant to retire in the traditional way. Maybe we were meant to redefine it altogether. So the gap. What's the gap? The gap is what we're going to explore today, the difference between financial planning and lifestyle planning, and why focusing exclusively on the former, financial planning, it might leave you with a well-funded retirement that seems strangely empty. So let me share two more stories with you here. The first is about Jim. Jim had done everything right according to tradition. He'd worked for over 30 years at a successful firm, saved diligently, and retired like clockwork at 65 with a generous pension, there's a word you don't hear too much, and a well-diversified portfolio. Everything the books, the advisors, and the retirement calculators told him to do, he did. He's the poster child of a first world retirement. Then what? What is the purpose of our human-made retirement bubble that has no redeeming value other than creating large bank accounts? 6 months later, his wife called me. She said, Jim's not himself. He's drifting. He doesn't get up at the same time anymore. He wanders around the house. He doesn't even seem happy when we travel. Now, Jim had money, lots of it. He had time, more time than he had money. But he didn't have a plan for living. Now let's rewind to a different scene, a college campus. It's move-in day. So our story now is about Josh, an 18-year-old who's unloading his boxes with the help of his parents, who are dropping him off. After a few hugs and last-minute advice from the parental units, he turned to his folks with confidence that only an 18-year-old with no idea of what he doesn't know can muster. And then he says, now I can finally do whatever I want. And he meant it. No curfews, no chores, no reminders. To him, total freedom. His first university week was glorious. He stayed up late, binged movies, lived on pizza, and played video games for hours. By the time the weeks rolled on and he got into his second month, reality started to bite. He was constantly fatigued. His grades slipped. He forgot assignments. Meals became an afterthought. He missed his home, not because he wanted to be told what to do, but what is it that he missed? The very thing he said he didn't want, structure. He missed the scaffolding that made life function and work for him as a teenager. What Josh had not realized was that freedom without intention isn't freedom. It's drift. And here's where the two stories converge. Jim and Josh are decades apart in age, but they both encountered the same truth. Doing whatever you want doesn't automatically lead to a meaningful life. Whether you're 18 or 68, fulfillment requires intention, direction, and rhythm. It also requires sequence, purpose, identity. This is the crux of the retirement dilemma. We plan for retirement as though it's a single question. Do I have enough money? And maybe a second question. Will I have enough to outlive it? But that's only half the question. The real question is, enough for what? What are you going to do with your time, your energy, your wisdom, and your body? So let's define some terms. Financial planning is about managing your assets so that you don't outlive your money. Okay, that's what we've talked about. It's budgeting, saving, investment strategy, and estate planning. It's essential, but it's not sufficient, because no matter how well you've prepared financially, your money cannot tell you who you are or why you get out of bed in the morning. That's where lifestyle planning comes in. Lifestyle planning is about crafting a life of purpose, connection, and vitality. It's about answering questions like, who am I now that I'm no longer working? What brings me joy and happiness? How do I stay engaged physically and mentally? What relationships do I want to deepen or repair? What structure will give my days meaning? So now let's go back to Jim. He's the retiree. His financial planner helped him with his tax efficiency, his risk tolerances, and withdrawal strategies, but never asked him how he'd replace the sense of accomplishment he got from leading a team during his career. No one asked him about his friendships at work that had once given him daily connection. No one asked about his passions and his goals beyond money management. Furthermore, Jim had elderly parents in good health now, but as the eldest son, he carried the responsibility of taking care of them when they lose their health. And to make matters more complicated, his daughter was having a tough time with her marriage and her 3 children. So Jim floated. He filled his time with tasks, but not purpose. He traveled, but didn't feel fulfilled. He had freedom, but lacked direction. The irony is that he was no less lost than Josh had been in his dorm room. Guys, ladies and gentlemen, this is not anecdotal. This is well-defined research. A study by Hill and Turiano, this is in 2014, found that older adults with a strong sense of purpose had a significantly lower risk of mortality, even when controlling for variables like age, gender, or wealth, meaning money. Purpose literally extends life. Another research done in 2010, and this is an early research, there's updated one since then, found that social isolation is as damaging to health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Let that sink in. Being disconnected has the same health risk as a pack-a-day habit. Now keep in mind of what COVID and the government's response to COVID was. It is generationally damaging. When we isolate anybody, regardless of age, it is psychologically damaging. And yet many retirees lose the daily social contact that work once provided. More recent research indicates that loneliness is a greater killer than cigarette smoking altogether. All right, now let's talk about structure. Work gave you a schedule. For Josh, if you remember, his parents and his schooling gave him a schedule, gave him a structure, gave him something to focus on. He had to be somewhere. Well, before you retired, you had to be somewhere. You had responsibilities, deadlines, meetings. You had what we call a rhythm. And that rhythm kept your mind engaged. It kept your body moving. It kept your calendar full. Without structure, time becomes formless. Days blend into each other. A week passes and you wonder, what did I actually do? You may still be busy, but busyness is not the same as significance. That's why lifestyle planning includes not just what you do in retirement, but how you do it. What does your morning look like? Do you move your body? Do you have time set aside for creativity, learning, mindfulness, or service? Do you have anchor points in your week like volunteering, group workouts, spiritual activities, all that contribute and give shape to your time? Now, the big one, for me, the biggest one of all, is identity. Many people don't realize how tightly their identity is wrapped around their career until they walk away from it. I'm a doctor, I'm a CPA, I'm a lawyer, I'm a teacher, I'm a manager, I'm a sales professional. You can think of any number of these. When that role disappears, it can feel like part of you disappears with it. Retirement without reinvention becomes stagnation. But retirement with reflection can lead to a deeper version of yourself, one that isn't tied to a title, but to your values, one that is not about external achievement, the awards, the different things that you accomplished during your life, but about internal alignment. Think of the movie Inside Out. And this is what I call your encore self, The version of you that integrates your experiences, your wisdom, and your passion into a brand new chapter. Not a lesser chapter, a more intentional one. So, with identity, the next one is purpose. There is no purpose without a pure identity or a true identity. In retirement, the loss of purpose is one of the biggest threats to well-being. In a longitudinal study conducted in 2014, older adults who reported having a clear sense of purpose lived significantly longer than those who did not. Again, regardless of age, wealth, or health. Purpose, it turns out, is not just a philosophical concept. It's a biological driver. It affects your immune system, your cardiovascular health, and your resilience to stress. And under stress, everything breaks down. Now imagine someone who retires without a plan for purpose. Their calendar is empty, or it's just busy work. Their reason for getting out of bed is unknown to really anybody. It's vague. They sleep in more. They go to bed later. They spend more time on social media or just chilling or vegging in front of a screen. They lose all mental stimulation that came from solving problems, leading teams, or mentoring others. Over time, their confidence erodes, not because they're incapable, but because they've stopped engaging with life in any meaningful way. Guys, that's not freedom. That's deterioration. So here's the next one. We also need to understand about the social aspect of retirement. I talked about loneliness earlier. This is about connection and family. We are hardwired for connection. It's a biological reality. It's not optional. Loneliness isn't just unpleasant. It's deadly. We already talked about increasing mortality by up to 30%. It's like smoking 15 cigarettes a day, but now we have found that it's killing more people than are the cigarettes. The workplace often provides opportunity for casual social connections. So lunch with a colleague, right? Hallway conversations, over the water cooler, at the copier, and the different shared projects that you're all on. But what happens when that's gone and it's not replaced with deliberate efforts to connect? Well, the impact is severe. Family relationships can also be strained in retirement. Couples who spent years living parallel lives may suddenly find themselves face to face all day, every day. Pretty soon the wife starts asking the husband, "Don't you have something to do today? Why can't you go back to work? Get a part-time job. Go golfing with your friends. Do something." But what she's really saying is that you're driving me nuts because we had parallel lives. We never connected during the working years and the raising of the kids' years. How do we know that's true? Here are the statistics. We talked about this earlier. Divorce rates among adults over 50 have more than doubled since 1990. For adults over 65, they've tripled. And these numbers don't include invisible divorces, which occur when couples simply cohabitate without any emotional or physical intimacy. Connection does not happen by accident. It must be cultivated through shared activities, new friendships, community involvement, or even part-time work that brings people together. And now we come to our last component, health. Retirement can either be a physical revival or a very slow, deadly decline. It depends on your habits. The American College of Sports Medicine reports that regular physical activity reduces the risk of nearly every chronic illness. And here's the catch. People with purpose and structure are more likely to stay active. People with meaningful routines are more likely to eat well, sleep better, and care for their bodies. So, here's the question. Are you planning for the money and the meaning? Or are you just planning for the money? If you've already retired, perhaps you're drifting like Jim, or maybe you're designing your days with the same intention that once brought you to your career. Those are the two options you have. If you're preparing to retire, are you thinking beyond the spreadsheets? Have you considered what your new identity will be? What will your new routine look like? What story do you want to tell about this next chapter? Here's reality. Retirement is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of your encore years. Your encore years can be your most meaningful, your most connected, your most vibrant, if you plan for them. This is why lifestyle planning must include strategies for maintaining both mental and physical health. It's not about training for marathons. It's about walking daily, staying curious, learning new skills, emotional intelligence, social connections, and setting goals and learning the habits to support the goals that stretch you just enough. You don't have to become someone new after retirement, but you do have to become more of who you've always been. Here's a final story. It's a brief one. Laura was a recently retired school principal. That's her identity. After 6 months of retirement, I get the phone call. I thought I'd love the freedom, but I feel like I've lost my compass. She missed the problem solving, the mentoring, the sense of influence. We talked through her values, her strengths, and her untapped passions. Within months, that's it, just a few months, she was leading a local nonprofit's education initiative. She was mentoring young teachers and facilitating weekend workshops. At that point, when she had purpose, her energy came back. At that point, when her energy came back, her relationships improved. She did not need any more in the bank account. She didn't need to follow her interest rates. She needed a mission. This is the power of lifestyle planning. It's a conscious decision to shape your retirement around who you are and what matters to you, not just how much you've saved. So let's come back to the distinction. Financial planning is about having enough. Lifestyle planning is about being enough, feeling connected, living with intention, growing, contributing, and becoming. You need both. But if you only have the first, you risk waking up with a full bank account and an empty heart. Let me leave you with just a few questions to reflect on. What gives you energy? Who do you want to spend more time with? What skills or passions have you set aside that you'd love to revisit? And lastly, what kind of legacy do you want to build, not just financially, but relationally and emotionally? Your encore years are not the end of the story. They're the chapter where you finally get to live on purpose without the constraints of deadlines, bosses, or paychecks. Let's make it count. Thank you so much for joining me today on How Not to Retire. If this episode resonated with you, I encourage you to revisit your retirement plan, not just the numbers, but the narrative. And if you know someone who's approaching retirement or perhaps feeling stuck in it, share the podcast with them. Sometimes the most valuable gift we can give is a new perspective. Now, if you want to learn more, go to the website hownottoretire.com and check out the complimentary on-demand course with the same title. And as an FYI, stay tuned for my new book called Your Encore Years, The Psychology of Retirement. So until next time, I'm Dr. Richard Himmer. Stay curious, stay connected, and never stop becoming. And above all, remember, don't try harder, try different.